All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we are unpacking the actual mechanics of a really fascinating political framework. We're going to look at exactly how Islamic political theory structures governance, accountability, and leadership. And we're doing this entirely based on its own internal logic, meaning we are not just copy-pasting Western democratic models here. By digging into curated historical sources, we're going to see exactly how the civilization's system was built to operate. But before we get into the historical and legal nuts and bolts, we really have to ask a foundational question of political science. Honestly, every society has to answer this. How do you extract the very best ideas to run a civilization? Well, according to the sources we're exploring today, Islamic civilization answers this with a highly systemic mechanism called Shura, which essentially translates to consultation. So, here is our agenda for today. 1. The principle of Shura. 2. Selecting the leader. 3. Appointing local governors. And 4. Accountability and removal. All right, jumping in to Section 1, the principle of Shura. Now, what is really fascinating here is the vivid linguistic analogy that comes straight from the Arabic root of the word. Shura isn't just some dry administrative term. The sources explain that linguistically, it means to extract what something contains of goodness. It's literally compared to extracting the most precious, pure honey from a mountain cave or drawing water from a deep well to grow crops. So it's this active, deliberate process of pulling the absolute best out of a collective group to nourish and sustain the whole society. And, this isn't just some poetic metaphor. It is a binding legal reality. Historical scholars like Ibn Atiyah from the 12th century explain that Shura is literally one of the firmest rulings in Islamic law. Plus, Judge al-Mahi notes that consulting the nation to manage its affairs is a mandatory duty that underpins all public mandates. In fact, the texts argue that if a leader doesn't consult the people of knowledge, removing them from power becomes an absolute necessity. No exceptions. Moving on to Section 2, selecting the leader. Let's look at how this applies to the head of state. This brilliantly illustrates the sheer gravity of the concept. It's a stark, completely uncompromising warning from Umar bin al-Khattab, the second caliph. He flat out stated that if anyone gives the bay'ah, which is the Pledge of Allegiance, without consulting the other Muslims, that selection is completely invalid. He was warning of severe, even fatal consequences for circumventing the consultation process. It was that serious. So the crucial takeaway here is that the bay'ah is fundamentally a ruling contract between the Muslims and the state. Now, our sources do note that some later caliphs designated successors, but they consider that a misapplication of the foundational texts. The strict consensus, based on the era of the Rightly Guided Caliphs, is that legitimate authority absolutely, positively requires consultation with the Muslims. The public's voice isn't just nice to have, it's the prerequisite for legitimacy. Section 3. Appointing local governors. And hey, just a quick cultural note before we look at these historical examples. You'll notice our visuals avoid depictions of people. We're relying purely on text and symbols here. This is a deliberate choice to respectfully align with the historical and cultural context of Islamic art and tradition. Look at the specific criteria used during Caliph Umar's era for appointing emirs, or governors. According to the texts, Umar studied personalities intensely. He utilized strict testing. He completely avoided appointing any relatives, literally zero tolerance for nepotism. He also paid close attention to local customs, so he avoided placing leaders from the desert over city dwellers, for instance. And in a really striking example of championing equality, he appointed Salman al-Farsi, a former slave and a non-Arab, as the governor of Madain. Here is a super fascinating dilemma that Umar faced regarding the province of Kufa. The people there were notoriously difficult to govern. Umar openly consulted his advisors with a very specific choice between two men. Candidate A was a weak leader, but a highly, highly pious Muslim. Candidate B was a strong, tough leader, but maybe slightly less religiously committed. He asked his advisors which of these two is better suited to govern. His advisor al-Mughira beautifully deduced the political reality here. He pointed out that a pious man's weakness actually counts against the public and harms the Muslims, while the tough man's strength actively serves and protects the state. Basically, the personal piety of the weak man only benefits himself. Convinced by this very pragmatic logic, Umar appointed the stronger leader, telling him to be someone whom the righteous trust and the evildoers fear. Finally, Section 4. Accountability and removal. What happens when things go wrong? Obviously, removing a governor at the drop of a hat can cause major instability. But looking at this timeline from the Prophet's era, we can see that when the public actually has legitimate grievances, action is rapid. A delegation from Bahrain complained about their governor, Al-Ala. Almost immediately, the Prophet removed him and appointed a new governor, Aban, with explicit orders to treat the people well and honor their leaders. So swift executive removal was used to ensure fair treatment, all based directly on public consultation. But let's be real, the system also had to account for political realities, where the public might just be wrong. Sometimes people make entirely unjustified complaints. We see this during the Kufa crisis, where the influentials of the city falsely accused their highly respected governor, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, a man known to be of the absolute highest character. Look at how Umar handled this incredibly delicate timeline. He knew Sa'd was innocent, but to prevent a larger political crisis, what the sources call fitna or discord, Umar removed his innocent governor anyway. He did this simply to nip potential division in the bud. He was prioritizing the stability of the Ummah over the career of one individual leader. The real crucial takeaway for us here is how leadership was fundamentally viewed in this framework. Governorship was seen as a heavy burden and a serious religious duty. It was never supposed to be a personal opportunity for wealth or prestige. If a leader's presence, even a completely innocent leader, became a source of division or fitna, wisdom dictated that they step down for the sake of public stability. So how does this ancient system translate to today? Well, the sources map this to a modern framework, explaining that Islamic theory allows the Caliph to let provinces hold local elections for their own mayors or governors. The logic here is super straightforward. When leaders are elected by their local constituents, they're essentially forced to focus on the citizens' affairs, rather than their own personal interests or just trying to appease an out-of-touch central government. This actually creates a really powerful three-step counterbalance in its modern application. Step 1, the public elects their local leader through Shura. Step 2, the executive branch, or Caliph, ratifies that result. But Step 3 is the fail-safe, the Mahkamah al-Mazalim, which acts kind of like a Supreme Court. They provide oversight to check for election fraud or irregularities, which allows the executive to reject a corrupt election based on solid legal grounds. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We have seen how Shura operates as a mechanism for extracting the very best ideas, carefully balancing executive authority with intense public accountability. So how does this ancient honey extraction method of governance, one that prioritizes public stability and consultation way over individual power, compare to the political systems running our world today? It is a fascinating structural contrast, and it really challenges how we think about the mechanics of leadership.